Great, thanks, George. Hi, everyone. I really appreciated your comments just now because from AcuFocus's perspective, if I can get my slides up, are they just... Oh, there we go. So from AcuFocus's perspective, certainly we think that there are a lot of confounding factors that are influencing IOL selection for patients. And as George described, there's a lot of issues that are happening for patients like dry eye, like pathology, like higher order aberrations that are not actually addressed from our perspective by the current premium IOL optics that exist. Multifocality, torics, they attempt to correct aspects, but they're not really fully capable to provide a holistic approach as George just described. So let's talk about the IC8. So the IC8, as you know, is a small aperture intraocular lens. What we've done is combine a hydrophobic acrylic monofocal optic with an embedded mini ring. So when this is implanted in a patient's eye, it provides a reduced aperture for that eye. What that does is it protects and isolates those central organized light rays so that they reach the retina undisturbed, while simultaneously neutralizing those defocused peripheral light rays that degrade image quality. So the result is the patient achieves an extended depth of focus of around 3 diopters. So we've taken this lens from a concept to commercialization, starting with supporting a number of different international studies to evaluate performance in normal and irregular cornea eyes. We've launched the product very controlled manner in Europe and Asia Pacific and select markets because we wanted to work closely with physicians to understand how to optimize the performance of this lens technology because it's a different approach to vision correction. We've accelerated our commercial position in Australia because we wanted to focus in on a market that had a lot of high technology lenses so we could evaluate its performance and adoption. We also have our US IDE clinical trial underway. So that IDE, we concluded our enrollment in record time. The test arm finished in 5 months, and the whole study was concluded in 7 months. So now we have all patients in it. We have the 3-month follow-up. So we're on track for a hopeful US market entry at the end of Q4 2020 or Q1 2021. But what I want to talk to you about today is actually a completely different set of data that we've been culling over the last year. We wanted to really understand how is the lens being utilized in practices in Australia. So what we did was we approached 7 of our implanting practices, that's about 10%, 11% of our implanting surgeons, and we looked at all of the patients that they treated with an IOL in a 3-month consecutive time period. So overall, it's 573 patients, 1,200 eyes. And the practices represent different types of practices ranging from a purely focused cataract practice all the way to cornea practices as well as refractive and complex cataract clinics. So what did we find? At each of these individual clinics, they had a diversity of premium IOL adoption. From the very bottom, you can see predominantly monofocal utilization, and at the very top of the list, you can see a really nice mix with majority PCIOL utilization. And in all of these clinics, despite the fact that they're all very different in the way that they approach patients, they had a place for the IC8 to participate in their practice. When we asked the surgeons what kind of patients are they using it for, all of them said they use it for the irregular cornea patient because they find the optics being able to address the issues that are unique to that patient population. They're also using it to enhance monovision. So as we know, monovision is performed in 30% of patients annually, so we're actually helping the surgeon to advance and improve that procedure, which is a huge portion of the population that today is getting monofocals. So let's look at how do we do. Overall, in this cohort of patients, 8% of eyes received our lens, which is 11% of patients. And in terms of manufacturers, there were 12 different companies that were utilized by these surgeons. We ranked as the 6th most popular. One thing we wanted to look at as well is we know that our lens performs well with the irregular cornea patient. We wanted to understand what's the distribution of those kind of eyes presenting into these practices. As you can see here on this graph, we've defined irregular corneas as patients that have eyes with naturally occurring higher order aberrations in the cornea. That's 0.6 microns or higher. They could have had pathology such as keratoconus. They could have had prior corneal surgery, keratoplasty, refractive surgery. And then you have some patients that had both. And overall, that represented 15.6% of eyes treated by these surgeons, or almost 19% of patients walking through their door. That's a huge section. If you remember back to the percentages that George shared, 3.7% of patients today are receiving a premium IOL. This is a whole cohort of patients that these surgeons are saying our lens is uniquely qualified to treat, and these patients today are getting monofocals. So how did we do? So this population of patients, we saw that in the irregular cornea, the IC8 was chosen for 17% of eyes, or 21% of patients. And if you add up all of the PCIOLs that were used in these eyes, we outnumber all of them combined. How do we do in terms of just general PCIOL adoption? We actually came in at second most utilized in terms of methodology, behind trifocal. But if you were to look at the individual lens model that was used out of all the PCIOL lenses, we were the #1 most utilized lens platform, so small aperture won the day. We separated that out to understand how is it used in normal eyes versus irregular cornea. And to me, the take home here is really the fact that we're being used in normal patient eyes that have presbyopia or that need a presbyopia correcting solution. We're come just right after bifocal. But the irregular cornea segment, this is where the IC8 is delivering growth into the premium channel. If you look at the distribution, we've got over 50% of eyes that have irregular cornea are getting us as their PCIOL solution. So this is where I think the lens is actually a game changer in terms of driving more patients into that premium channel, because as we know, every patient needs range of vision in order to see. So that's not something that's limited just to the select group of people that today can afford to pay for it. So we're very happy with that result, obviously. Now, when we look at just the IC8 and what's the mix of patients that are being treated with this lens, we see about 30% of patients that get the IC8 have an irregular cornea, where 70% have a normal cornea. So we're getting a nice distribution and utilization across different patient types, so it isn't being niched into the irregular cornea segment. Typically what we see happening is that when the surgeon starts, they use it in the irregular cornea eye, and then they move it through their practice across into the normal cornea patients once they see how it performs. So overall, we think this lens methodology is an important one in order to help us advance our modern solutions to patients and provide more holistic approaches. Thank you.
Perfect, Yari. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.